plants have been moved where? South, where racism is greatest and unionization is virtually non-existent, has become a place to pay auto workers $10 or $12 or $14 an hour instead of $28 or $30 an hour, and has dragged down the living standards of obviously the black workers, but the white workers as well. That actually racism is something that not simply morally deprives us all and drags us down and ethically is wrong, but actually materially destroys our lives. I will set aside, although it's not a small point, as a lesbian and as a revolutionary socialist, I find it absolutely unacceptable and unbelievable that organizations that call themselves revolutionary have retained homophobic ideas for literally decades, up until just a few years ago, because they were so insistent on defending societies that defended homophobia that they basically said that gays and lesbians and transgender people are not part of our movement. Unacceptable. You stand against all oppression, or you are, frankly, wrong. And I will end on this. I will say that the conception of revolutionary leadership is entirely different. We believe that leaders are born and earn their way as leadership in struggle. The idea that you have somebody who's literally lived outside of the United States for decades, who gets up and gives speeches for hours like Bob Avakian, is some sort of leader, I'm sorry, is frankly a bit of a joke. And it's frankly a little bit kooky and cult-like. You know, this is not an accountable and elected, democratically elected leader. This is somebody that a handful of people some 40 years ago determined had some good ideas. Maybe he does. I don't have 4 hours to listen to them. I do think, however, I mean, not to make fun, I do honestly think that there is a problem with the conception that leadership comes from on high somewhere and is not accountable to anyone. It doesn't even live in the same country as the people who are actually, who he's supposedly leading. This has nothing to do with the Marxist tradition as any of us here understand it. We believe that leadership, new leaders are being born right now out of the Occupy movement, who are our comrades in struggle, and frankly have much more to offer than somebody who has been in exile for 40 years.
So I work for a place that's pretty decentralized, and I'm trying to organize with workers where I'm at. I know other comrades who are facing the same challenge, and so my question is, maybe 30 years ago, you know, manufacturing was a lot bigger in this country. You know, the working class was concentrated on shop floors and in, you know, big factories, and more we're moving to where the working class is part of this service economy. And, you know, so the challenge I've faced and, you know, other people I've talked to have faced has been, you know, how do you coordinate struggle when your workplace is so decentralized? You know, and this goes for retail workers too, you know, people who work at, you know, McDonald's, small shops like that, or, you know, in healthcare in some cases, which is mine. And so I was just wondering about examples of workers coordinating this and what has been successful in bringing people like in this service economy together. And you know, like watching Verizon now, I'm really curious because you have the landline workers who have a union, but the retail workers in the wireless stores, you know, they're kind of in that decentralized location. And you know, there's been a push from picketing at those stores to, like, you know, get them to do their own action. And I haven't seen it personally, but was wondering about similar examples like that.
I have a sister on the side next. I've got you on the list.
Okay.
I've only got one other person on the list, and he's spoken already, which doesn't mean he can't speak again, but I would like to encourage folks who haven't spoken, especially female voices, to get on the list, bring up questions now. Always happens we get to the end of the time and all of a sudden everybody's figured out what they want to say. So even if it's not totally formulated, throw it out there. Okay, great. I see some hands. Go ahead. I keep them up for a second while I...
Yeah, my name is Alpina. I'm from Cambridge, branch of the ISO here. I just wanted to step back a little bit and talk about why socialists talk about the working class. Like, why do we emphasize the working class so much? And I think, you know, why do we say that, okay, it's not this class, it's this one, you know, it's this one. And one of the reasons is because as workers, in workplaces, we're already, I think, organized together. We're already in situations where we begin to see how our work in a collective way actually produces something for an entity, for a boss who profits off of our labor. We see a common working experience and a common experience when the boss attacks us and cuts our benefits, for example, or cuts, attacks us on racist or sexist lines, and so forth. That they do it in a collective way. And so in the first place, the working class already sees itself as collective, and that's different than other classes that may be, for example, people brought up small shop owners, that see their future as based on whether they can either exploit some workers or individualize. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, the other reason why the working class is important is its relationship to profit and the creation of wealth, which is I think something central that Shaun talked about, which is what is capitalism? It's based on the creation of profit for the few, cuts for the 99%. So the working class essentially is the creator of wealth in society, and thereby is able to remove its labor power and shut down capitalism and stop the creation of that wealth. So in those couple of ways, the working class is important. Just wanted to say another thing about lumpen proletariat that people have been talking about. First of all, I think sex workers are workers. That we support their right to organize and unionize, and many have been doing so. Marxism talks about lumpen proletariat as a marginalized section. Some people have addressed that, but essentially under capitalism, it's a reserve army of labor. It's basically a group of people that capitalism has marginalized in order to downgrade the wages of employed workers. A reserve army that's able to come in moments of of crisis or boom especially, and take jobs, but exert downward pressure on wages of the unemployed. So it's not to be dismissive of lumpen workers, but the question is, what is capitalism, and how can we actually attack it at the point of profit? And that class, is the working class. For example, next week when SEIU goes on strike here, at Harvard, there's not just going to be an occupation at Harvard Yard, but like no maintenance. Nothing will function. It's not just going to be within the yard, but the entire university will not be able to flush a toilet. So you think about where the power lies in being able to really bring the university to a halt. That's the question.
All right.
In the back. Yeah. I'm Douglas, and I just want to let you know, in answer to the comrade who spoke about nationalism.
I didn't actually. Sorry, I wasn't actually calling on you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to prioritize folks who haven't spoken
That's
yet.
fine,
I've got some on the list, but yeah.
I just wanted to sort of build on the question that the friend over there asked about decentralized labor and the service industry, and just also make that question a little more specific to a situation that I personally am also facing, which is contracted labor and subcontracted labor, which presents a really difficult environment to actually do any sort of organizing in. And there was an article in the New York Times about this a week or so ago, specifically about contracting out public services, and the article basically made the point that it ended up not being cheaper as claimed by the contractors, and the fact that basically the money that the state and local governments were paying to these companies, the workers' wages were cut in half, and the rest of the money basically goes to middlemen or middle people. And so, I think that sort of shows how capitalists can take any opportunity to take money out of things and just lower people's wages, but it also presents a real practical difficulty for, if the company I work for, contract is up in 6 months and I start an organizing drive, that contract is, it's terminated in 6 months. There's no renewal, and it's very hard to convince your coworkers that they should do that if they see the options as organizing and possibly losing their job altogether, or just accepting their currently low wage. And so I don't know if anybody has ideas or thoughts about how you can address a situation like that.
Just what we were saying earlier about strikes and how the class is trying to, make all these laws against strikes and everything, because if we can gather like that, then we're on the fault. They can't enforce that without their law enforcement. And there's a lot of people within the Occupy movement, within all this stuff, who are basically demonizing the police. And I hate police brutality as much as anyone else here. I think that, what happened to the scuttles and all that, it was horrible. That stuff should not be happening. And in fact, there are police who are defending those actions and other actions of police brutality. That's horrible. But at the same time, I think that the police should be viewed as part of the working class. And in fact, if we are viewing the police as evil or whatever, yes, in a way they are, but at the same time, if we can ally ourselves with them, then perhaps there might be a day when we have our strikes or we have our occupations, and instead of trying to shut us down, if the police could instead protect us, because that's what their job is supposed to be. They're supposed to be protecting the people.
No, they're not. Their job is to support the state.
Folks want to come to that? Raise your hand again.
Well, I believe that the role of the police should be protecting uphold peace, whatever. Basically, I think that again, if we can stop demonizing them and start trying to it can be.
Okay. Ashley, then Owen.
Yeah, I'm Ashley from Burlington. I'll take that up because I think that is a big debate in the Occupy movement, because a lot of people are brand new to politics and often have not experienced confrontations with the police. They're often not from black neighborhoods, they're often not from immigrant backgrounds, and so they haven't had the daily life experience. If you're black in New York City, the cops come and harass you. These stop and frisk actions of the New York City Police Department, basically if you're a teenage black guy, you can stop and frisk dozens of times in the last couple of years. That's part of daily experience. So I think a lot of people are coming into the movement and they haven't encountered that before, and so they have the sort of TV version of officer friendly, that officer friendly can help you, get across the street or whatever. And so people bring in that expectation, and then there's the reality about what the police have done in the Occupy movement, which is crack heads, arrest people, and throw them in jail, and not them get food or water or access to a phone for hours. And then that causes an ideological crisis where people are like, well, what are the cops? Because there's the expectation, and then there's the reality. And then that's where Marxism is so important, to cut through what they say, the ruling ideas of the ruling class, what they say and what's real. As a Marxist, it's very clear that the police are not part of the working class. If you look at the conditions of police officers, they're removed from working class people, they're often paid higher, they have better working conditions, they happen to have better retirement plans, they live apart from the rest of the working class. Their role in strikes is where it's brought home in the clearest way. What is the role of a cop in a strike? Is to bust open the picket line and bring the scabs in. And often they're paid overtime, not only by the police department, but by the employer to get extra money to crackheads to open up to crush the workers' strike. That's why we have to have a clear understanding that really police are paid agents of the 1%. They may pass themselves off at various moments as friends of the working class, but when push comes to shove, when the UPS strike was on here in Boston in 1997, UPS workers and police were organized by the same union. Push comes to shove at the UPS picket lines. Those Teamster cops cracked the heads of their Teamster quote-unquote brothers and sisters. So it's very clear they're paid agents of the ruling class that do their dirty work, to bust strikes, to keep poor people down, to be racist, to do racist profiling of black people in particular in the United States. That's why we shouldn't appeal to them. We have to build solidarity on our real side, the real majority of our side, which always suffers at the hands of the police, and we'll certainly have to kick them out of the way. And they're different than the military. The military is different because police, it's a career. The military, you're in there for a temporary time, you come from the working class, you come back to the working class. So Scott Olson is ours, cops are theirs.
Wow, very well said. So my name's Owen, I'm from Maine, passing through Boston on my way to Zuccotti Park. And I just wanted to take up the whole decentralization question, like in service workers and stuff. And I think one of my favorite quotes from Trotsky, I forget exactly where he said it, but I think it's a very useful thing to frame when you're thinking about the state of class struggle in America today, which is that history never gives anything up without taking something in return. That is to say, we have a much more decentralized working class. It's, you know, heavily, there's a lot more service sector stuff. But it's also true the case that we have the internet. You know, we have there was no internet in 1917, but they still had a fucking revolution, which means imagine what we could do now. You know, I think that it's important to think about think about the struggles of the American working class in the 1930s. There was no civil rights movement. There was, you know, I mean, there was the communists in Harlem doing excellent work around, you know, leading some of the first sit-ins ever, you know, and desegregating bus lines in the 1930s. But there was not the kind of, there was not the formal equality that exists. There was no LGBT rights movement in the 1930s. You know, there are scattered things, but never on a national scale. No women's rights movement. So I think that there are certain ways in which the American working class is actually much further advanced politically than we were in the 1930s, even though we're subject to a kind of decentralization, scattering up of our communities that they didn't have to face in the 1930s. But in terms of just, you know, just to pull a concrete example about the kind of the way in which sometimes these smaller places or contracted or more decentralized industries can become unionized, I think the Russian Revolution is a great example. I'm reading Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution right now, and he talks about how, you know, in the initially after the February Revolution, that it was actually the big plants, you know, like the traditional stuff, like metal, those were like the most active and militant parts of the working class. And then in July, there was a serious retreat. There was a defeat and a retreat, and the revolution was kind of on the fences. And actually, by, you know, a month later, in early August, it ends up being the smaller factories and the smaller workplaces, the textiles, that kind of thing, that end up taking up the leading role and really surging forward in the struggle. And I think that it's important to remember that there's a dialectic. You know, people will get the confidence that they need, you know, for a contracted company to organize a union, and as part of that organization can't be like, yeah, we're taking over this workplace until we have a permanent contract. Yeah. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, I have 5 people on the list. Did I miss any? Okay, good. I mean, you'll find out if I don't call you, and let me know. So I'm actually going to try and keep people closer to 2 minutes now. Since we have 5, I want to get through what we've got on the list. If there's any final, especially questions that you haven't asked yet, that you need to ask, raise a fist. Okay, excellent. Is that a question? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then we're going to kick it back to Shaun at the end here. Yeah, if you have a question, go ahead with your question.
I'm still kind of stuck on the police issue because I'm into this as well. But I had a question about, it seemed like the comments that were being made were sort of directed towards white cops. But I had a question about how does that equate to people of color cops? So, because my mom is actually a cop and she's a black woman and I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So I'm just wondering how that works.
Great, thank you for bringing that up. All right, on the list I had here in the gray.
As far as with retail workers go, I've been working.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant in front of you here.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. No, sorry.
Right, it was nope. Yes, you.
I'll agree with some things that I want to touch on. I think sort of the open with the proletariat, those who have been outcast. And if we look at the recent poverty projections, we're using conservative numbers that the Government Accountability Office uses, poverty is skyrocketing. Those who are certainly who have just been outside, or now just outside of what we talk about when we talk about the economy is growing. And one of the things that's funny when you read editorials in Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, when they send down their correspondence to Park, they talk about how there's homeless people there, sort of anti-cultural, outcasts there. It's all very scattered and everything. And what sort of you recognize is that while I think this is sort of ugly, what we sort of see is the inclusivity, the beauty of sort of bringing people together, sort of the progressive nature of sort of the inclusive of including those who are cast aside in capitalist society. So what I sort of see when we talk about what it means to sort of resurrect class consciousness, and one of the things that we talk about is, we're decentralized in workplaces, they have all sorts of sort of mechanisms to break solidarity among the workers, minor, advancements in place, minor growth in their income, these sort of things, always asking you to apply for another job if you're working at a corporation. These are ways that they could break solidarity and keep people in competition with each other. And the only way to sort of break that is education and struggle. They talk about building that. That's what it is. People they recognize their potential, and they see that those minor risks, am I going to lose, a minor risk compared to what the real costs are, that creating a better society, that those become worthwhile to take. Union drives to take on a real progressive gain.
Thank you. Okay, right in front of me.
Yeah, so I think that absolutely, the police are agents of the state. There's no doubt that they are, that they come in, serve the interests of the state, and that goes right to the nature of the state, which Ashley covered really well in the intro talk earlier today. But even more than that, in regards to sort of the class dynamic, they're not workers. They don't produce capital. They defend capital. And they're not technically, they're not proletariat. They're not producing, they're not working, they're not producing labor, or they're not producing wealth. So absolutely, the police are human beings. There's absolutely individuals, and there are these bourgeois ideas about what the roles of the police are, that plenty of police have. Believe that they're protecting and serving, there's no doubt. But as they function as a structure, a tool of the state, it's quite clear. You can watch it happen again and again. You can watch the police come through on their giant trucks and their giant water guns in the 60s or in South Africa. You can see right now around the entire Occupy movement. You can just yesterday, all over YouTube, where the cops just beating the crap out of the Berkeley students, right? Just whacking them. So I think it's well, absolutely. The police are individuals. They have various ideas about what their roles are and what they're doing. Overall, it's quite clear what their role is and quite clear who they serve and how they act.
No, you sure? Okay. Yes. Yes, you.
I want to make sure. So about retail workers, I think, this probably is not a crowd that believes very much in coincidence, but the fact that capitalism is in a point where it is refining its own processes of creating and extracting wealth from the working class can't be a coincidence that that's the same time that the service sector is expanding. Because as someone who's worked in the service sector for 5 years, what is drilled into your head, you are the face of the company. You are the one who represents yourself to the company's interest to the wider place. There is, just as producers in manufacturing have a strength as part of the chain of production in that system, so too do retail workers who are in the front. And yes, they might be atomized and spread out all over across further workplaces, but the amount of energy and sales that can actually be created by that staff is huge. And by that staff not cooperating, or by moving, particularly moving the labor movement into those places, can have just as drastic an effect on the mechanism of extracting wealth from workers as it would stopping it at the production point. The production point and the point of sale, both are as significant to the wealth parasites in their eyes. It doesn't matter whether you make the parasites.
Sister in the hat, steps.
I just wanted to speak first of all on the question of nationalism that somebody brought up. Obviously, I agree that it's sort of reactionary, but I mean, I thought that a lot of the examples that Ashley brought up in the talk earlier about global solidarity between Egypt and Wisconsin and Palestine and Occupy Wall Street are really kind of opening people's minds to the possibility of working class unity being global. I mean, I think one of the things that I've seen within Occupy Boston that's kind of a little, I mean, it's a rare tendency, but there was definitely somebody I talked to who said that they didn't think that amnesty for undocumented workers was a good idea. So that's one of those things where people have these nationalist ideas that we need to that we need to speak against. But I mean, I think that there are definitely things coming out where people are resisting that. In terms of the question about the role of the police, I think a lot of people have spoken pretty well about what the role of the police are. But I wanted to bring up a recent case. There was an episode of This American Life where it was about a whistleblower in the Brooklyn Police Department. And it's really like listening to it will freaking turn your hair white if it's not already. It's terrifying. The things that this man uncovered, because I mean, he went into the police department believing, oh shit.
You got 30 seconds.
But yeah, he went in with the intention to protect and serve, and discovered that because of the leadership of the police department, really all they were doing was terrorizing people. They were arresting people just to get arrest numbers up and downplaying the actual crimes that were happening in order to show that, falsify that their efforts were being effective. They were literally kidnapping people off the street in order to demonstrate, and it was invariably black men, of course, in order to get their arrest records up, people who had done nothing. This cop was instructed by his higher-ups to, he was instructed by his higher-ups to basically, like, goad teenagers on the street into cussing them out just as an excuse to arrest them. So, yeah.
All right. It's been waiting so patiently
That's
to
okay.
speak again. If you can keep it really short.
Yes, I will.
And then I got a couple announcements.
In terms of combating nationalism, there is now a socialist caucus at Occupy Boston. We have 4, maybe 5 groups now who are willing to work together because we believe the simple premise that capitalism is the problem and socialism is the solution. If you want to learn more, please talk to me afterwards. We also have the Howard Zinn Memorial Lecture Series where we're bringing socialists, left-wing voices to speak at Boston. People you may have heard of, such as Anthony Arnav, Paul LeBlanc, Noam Chomsky, are coming, or have come. So I urge you to also check out zinlectures.wordpress.com. Thank you, that's all.
I'm sorry, I apologize. And just to say, we got a little bit of a break between sessions. People should continue these conversations. And just a couple of announcements. One, as you may have heard at the first session, we are in this building today because Harvard is occupied, and they've decided that that is so scary and we are so scary that we cannot be allowed onto Harvard Yard. So we are in this building. This track will continue to be in this room for the next 2 sessions. The other 2 tracks, you're supposed to stay in this, but anyway, in case you're not, just to let you know, Black Liberation and Socialism track is happening in Lecture Hall A, and the Marxism and Impression track is happening in 110. Like I said, 2 quick announcements. One, I don't have a flyer or anything, but save the date. There is this happening again on a much huger, than grammatically correct scale. Every summer, the Socialism Conference. It's happening again this year in Chicago. We often do it in Chicago. Great radical history in Chicago. And this year, it's going to be June 18th to July 1st. So go ahead and save the date for that. More information will be coming up about it. And you want to be there. It's incredible. It's like this, only, I don't know how to describe how much, What?
No, there's the left form and
June 28th to July 1st. Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure what I said. But that's what it is. The other announcement, really quick before Shaun wraps up, is if you are in town tomorrow night, the Boston Palestine Film Festival, Existence is Resistance, is hosting a hip-hop show, a Palestinian hip-hop show. It's got a great title, Mic Checkpoint. Which is awesome. Hip-hop against injustice everywhere. There's a number of performers, including, if anybody's seen, what's it called? Yeah, Dom, but the name of their video, Slingshot Hip Hop. Anyway, there's a number of performers tomorrow night. It's different organizations in solidarity with Palestine. If anybody wants one of these, come up and grab one. All right, I'm going to throw it back to Shaun to magically tie up all the women.
that will require magic. Mic check. That was a really great discussion. There's a lot of questions. I'm not sure I'll get to all of them, so maybe we can continue to talk afterwards. It does say that the sign outside says that the working class is in here. I think Sherry dealt really well with the question of the RCP, but I want to step back a bit and really put this in the context of what is the real Marxist tradition, what is Marxism really about, and I think that there's a line that has been drawn. Trotsky wrote an essay called Stalinism versus Bolshevism versus Stalinism, and he said that, and so the origins of this discussion are really rooted around what happened in the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution, I think, was a genuine workers' revolution, where Russian workers overthrew Russian capitalism and ended the First World War, Russia's participation in that war, and they attempted to build a socialist society. They did it under very, very difficult conditions because Russian society was very backward. Economically, it was destroyed by the war. A civil war attempted to strangle the revolution, and 14 imperialist countries tried to invade Russia to hold back the spread of revolution internationally. Lenin and Trotsky, who were two of the leaders of the revolution, members of the Bolshevik Party, which had become a mass party. It wasn't a minority party, it was a minority party for a long time, but as the level of struggle in Russian society grew, it became a mass party of hundreds of thousands of workers in workplaces all across Russia that actually were able to lead a revolution and became the hegemonic class that led the peasantry towards overthrowing capitalism. That revolution did spread. There was a revolution in Germany in 1918, there was a revolution in Hungary, but ultimately the international revolution did not spread, which was a tragedy, which then meant that Russia was left isolated and without the material means to actually create socialism. And out of the ruins of the attempt to build a socialist society, you had the rise of Stalinism. And Stalinism was essentially a new ruling class inside Russia. It still called themselves communists. The whole idea of workers' councils being democratic places where workers made decisions about the future of society, that was all abolished. The party made all the decisions, and the party did not have democratic debate. It was the central committee of the party that made all the decisions. And so workers inside Stalinist Russia it was very similar to what